formation of Miyetti Allah Vigilante, a national security outfit by Miyetti Allah, Katol Hore, has drawn the anger of some social, cultural, and political groups such as the Yoruba, Afenifere, Igbo Handeze, Ndigbo, and the Niger Delta's PANDEF, who described its national outlook as unacceptable. They argue that the activities of the Fulani security outfit should be localized rather than giving it a national coloration. The national president and secretary of the association, Belu Badijo and Saleh Al-Hassan, respectively, have disclosed news of the formation of the outfit in a communique issued in Abuja on Wednesday, saying it was aimed at assisting security agencies in checkmating crimes such as kidnapping, cattle rustling, and banditry. However, reacting to the formation of Miyetti Allah Vigilante, the Pan-Yoruba social political organization, Afenifere, said it was waiting for the response of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Malami, over the security outfit. We're seeing yet another wave of security outfits. I mean, what's your take on this?
I think that there's a lot of mistrust in the land, first and foremost, because we just find a way to politicize and ethnicize everything, don't we? You would recall that, you know, in recent times, with the spate of insecurity, we found states and regions coming together to set up security outfits, like the Amotekun in the southwest, although none of them is yet to really kick off, because there were hitches and challenges of the legality of it. You cannot have a regional security outfit because the Constitution does not recognize regions. And, you know, the fought them back with the Attorney General of the Federation and the state governors. The same thing happened for the Southeast. And remember, there was one touted for the northern region, Shege Kafasa, that the governors found to be, what's the word? Insultive. And, you know, they rejected it. That was touted by the youths of the region. And then we're having Miyetti Allah. If you know the history of farmer-herders relationship and the role Miyetti Allah has come to play, I think it just boils down to how poorly we have handled security situation in the country and the issue of trust.
Dr. Abati.
Yes, well, I mean, the emergence of all these regional security outfits is a direct result of the failure of the Nigerian government, either at the federal level or at the state level, to provide enough security to guarantee the safety of lives and property. And hence, people are forced to resort to self-help. States, regions, as it were, are forced to, you know, resort to self-help. But as all things Nigerian, you'll find that, you know, there are subtextual indications in the attempt to do this. And the subtext has to do with ethnicity, it has to do with fight over land and space, it has to do also with religion. And what you then find in these attempts by groups and persons saying that they have a responsibility to protect themselves in the face of the failure of the state, as it were, you find all of those subtextual issues coming together and further complicating the process. Now, in the case of the Miyetti Allah is like a trade union. It's a cattle breeders and rearers association. And the Miyetti Allah Kautar Hore has had quite a number of issues across the country for grazing cattle, with allegations that, you know, some of these cattle rearers are closet, you know, bandits or closet terrorists, compelling many communities, particularly in the South, to stand up against them. And, you know, the assumption, I assume, on the part of Miyetti Allah is that many of these groups being set up, Amotekun in the Southeast. The Southeast is also talking about his own security outfit, which was opposed by the Inspector General of Police. When Amotekun came up, which is the Western Nigeria security outfit, it was opposed by the Attorney General of the Federation, who said, look, such a structure is unknown to law, to the Nigerian Constitution, and therefore it was unacceptable. But in any case, what we now have is a trade union saying that it's going to create its own security outfit nationally, and it's to help with kidnapping, with cattle rustling, and all of that. So the response of Afenifere is simply this, that Afenifere would like to see how the Attorney General of the Federation, the same person still in office, how he will react to this before they will go further. But Afenifere is insisting, of course, on the restructuring of Nigeria. But in this particular matter, they say we would like to see what Attorney General Malami will say this time around. The PANDEF, that's the Pan Niger Delta Forum, his chairman, Air Commodore Idonesi Nha, he says he believes that the Miyetti Allah is just grandstanding. Because this is not the first time Miyetti Allah will say they will set up their own national security outfit. And they've not done it yet. But that if they do it, that the people of the South or the Niger Delta are waiting for them. Now, the Middle Belt Forum says, well, it's up to Nigerians whether or not to allow the Miyetti Allah to come and set up security outfits in their own part of the country. But Ohaneze Ndigbo and Pandef, they're saying, even if you want to set up anything, set it up in your part of the country. Do not come and rear cattle in the South, and then you say you have a security outfit to back it up. But it's for the relevant authorities, of course, to make sure that we don't have an escalation of conflict on account of trade unions setting up security outfit. Will fishermen also set up a national security outfit? Will farmers also set up a national security? So this is how ridiculous it could be.
Let's just be careful. Let's be careful, Nigeria. The senator representing Borno South Central District, Ali Ndume, has kicked against the ongoing reintegration of self-acclaimed former Boko Haram fighters into the society. Responding to a question on the BBC Hausa Service program, Senator Ndume asked the government to stop rehabilitating combatants because they'll never repent. And according to him, the government's program is unacceptable to our people. The right thing to do is to stop it forthwith. The military had in 2016 launched Operation Safe Corridor, an initiative for the de-radicalization and rehabilitation of ex-Boko Haram fighters. About 600 Boko Haram members completed a de-radicalization and rehabilitation and reintegration program in July. Is this, not sad? Because this same Ali Ndume is the head of the, the military committee in the Senate.
I think he's reiterating what we have said before on this show about this Operation Safe Corridor. First, he says it's wrong timing because the latest graduation for over 600 students came at a time when we saw the insurgents, executing 5 aid workers. He says, how can you explain this to the people to say the people who have caused you so much harm are the people you are rehabilitating, you're spending so much money on them, and you want to reintegrate them to the same society? It makes no sense.
Well, what we know is that not too long ago, these graduating terrorists who the Nigerian government claimed that they are going to integrate into the Nigerian society, they took an oath of allegiance to the Nigerian nation. And we had said that there is no guarantee that they will be faithful to that oath. You don't administer oath of allegiance on confirmed bandits. You take them through judicial process. You prosecute them if they have committed a crime. And I think Ali Ndume is right to say that there is no guarantee that these persons will behave like, normal citizens who believe in the rule of law.
Thank you so much for that. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus, Michael, and Aaron to give us updates on Africa, global business, and COVID-19. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now is Rotus Odiri with Africa Business Update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adesuwa. And good morning, Rufai. Okay, we kick things off. Good morning, Rufai. We kick things off with the Presidential Power Initiative, which has taken another crucial step towards, increasing electrification across the country. So there's a tweet that we have from the federal government that was sent out within the last few hours. There's, of course, President Buhari and Angela Merkel, who have spearheaded this movement. Of course, our deal is with Siemens. Siemens is the company that is going to be assisting us with getting this electrification deal through over the next 3 to 5 years. So, of course, the crucial part of this is funding. So that's a Federal Executive Council meeting, council that met yesterday. They approved payment of 15.2 partial payment of 50.21 million euros and a 1.7 billion naira payment towards the counterpart funding for the Presidential Power Initiative, power upgrade and modernization program. There's a lot of equipment that's going to be involved here. I should have had a graphic. I'm going to have to go through this. I have to just mention this to you. So there's what we should have here is the structure of the PPI funding and how. No, we're not. This is 3 bills. We'll get to that in a second. But the structure of the Presidential Power Initiative is going to require 85%, 85% coming from a consortium of banks. Remember yesterday, we were talking about the NNPC deal with the 2 energy oil trading companies. That deal only involves Standard Chartered, UBA, and the Afri-Exim Bank. It was a very small number because of this way the deal was structured. This is on a much wider scale because of what's going to be required to electrify Nigeria and increase the amount of megawatts that are passed through the country. So 85% is going to come through a consortium of banks backed by the German government, and it's going to be through an insurance company called Euler Hermes, which is a German firm. Also, 15% is going to come from the federal government of Nigeria's counterpart funding, which is what that tweet was referring to. So we've seen the first payment approved by the Federal Executive Council going through that. And then there's a 2 to 3 year moratorium, which is going to give them room through which they don't have to, pay anything for now. And then a 10 to 12 year repayment period. And during that period, it's going to be at concessionary rates. So the federal government has structured something very, very efficient here with Germany to get the electrification process going. There was also a quote, unfortunately, I'm sorry, again, this was from Tolu Ogunlesi, Special Advisor on Digital and New Media. He also talked about the opportunities for firms here in Nigeria. He said, and I quote, this bit is particularly exciting. There will be significant opportunities for local content on this project, the electrification project, for Nigerian companies to take part in the following: site surveys and soil investigation, civil works, supply of smart meters, very crucial, the meters, data center housing and data center hosting and power system modeling. So the electrification is going to allow for job creation along the way, but the crucial part is funding, and that's what the federal government has addressed. Next up is now we can bring up the chart for T-bills. Yesterday we had another Treasury bill auction, and at the top there is the different tenures: 91-day, 182-day, 364-day. This is a money market instrument with a maturity of less than a year, so it's capped at 364. And if you see there in the red arrow is the offer amounts. 91-day offered 49 billion. 182-day 54 billion, and 364 161. If you look at the subscription, the amount of funding, the amount of funds that chased after those offer amounts, they were all oversubscribed. The 49 billion 91-day oversubscribed to the tune of 94 billion naira. The 54 billion 182-day oversubscribed to the tune of 158 billion, and finally the 364, 215 billion going after 161. At the bottom, you see the previous stop rates in green. I mean, it's it's incredibly low. It's depressing. 1.3% for the 91-day. This is in green, 1.8, 3.3 for 364, and then the current stop rates. What stop rates we got yesterday? 1.2%, so they've dropped for the 91-day, 1.5 for the 182, and the 364 3.1. This is even lower than savings rates in banks. And we had Bismarck Rewane, the CEO of Financial Derivatives, yesterday talking about the impact of the partial closure of the Third Mainland Bridge and what it would mean for inflation. Inflation now, 12.5%. Your real rate of return, I continue to hammer this every time, is negative. Then we go on to airports. Andrew Nevin, who of course is a friend of the house, Rufai's good buddy at PwC, who constantly talks about economic matters. There's a report out, the Guardian, I believe, looked at some figures at the operations of Nigeria's airports. Between 2017 and 2019, the amount of revenue collected that was handled by airports run by the accounts allocated, FAN, came to about 15 billion naira, but the expenditure came to the tune of about 56 or so billion. So there's a deficit of 44 billion. So based on this report, Andrew Nevin is saying there's no more road. Nigeria has run out of fiscal room to subsidize these types of activities like wealthy flying. We are just at the beginning of a forced restructuring because of lack of funding. The issue here is whether we'll be orderly about it or disorderly, and then he says stay safe. So the airports are not profitable. Outside of Murtala Mohammed in Lagos, Nnamdi Azikiwe in Abuja, and the airports in Port Harcourt. Those are the only 3 that are profitable. All the others, unfortunately, are not. And the article talks about how there's political pressure for all the other airports to open up, but they're not profitable. They need to be concession to private hands. Finally, Ghana. We're going to be talking to an analyst on the Global Business Report later today from Ghana. Ghana's GDP expectations is looking at a 46-year low in 2020, but they've had such decent growth this last couple of years. 8.1% in 2017, 6.3% 2018, 6.5% last year. But look at that, it drops an estimate to 1%. So they're still avoiding a recession, they're avoiding a contraction in the negative region. But it's only 1%. And then we've got their business confidence and I think individual confidence in Ghana. That's also dipped as well. So that's pretty much what we're seeing across the African continent. I
mean, Rotus, I'm quite very shocked when I saw those numbers as regards how very difficult and how we're always having deficit in running government property. It's quite shocking too that the railways too were incurring a lot of debt, a lot of deficit. The government still has to augment. If this format, if this model is not working, we can't keep the airport, we can't keep this without adding a lot of subsidy money. Why don't we look at retweaking the model? I mean, that's a big question. The railway, I was hearing the other day that if they spend 60 million per month, the government will have to top that amount, to be able to allow for efficient running. I mean, if after close to 2 years now, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Kaduna to Abuja route has been working and they can't break even. Right. What sort of business is that? Right. And what sort of business is it with the airports?
Great point. And we talked about it. Rotimi Amechi, Minister of Transport, he talked about the fact that they've reduced the capacity on the trains, and that was he was talking about the 120 million in revenue that they get. By reducing capacity at 60 million, as you pointed out, they have to raise prices. So that's what has to happen. Prices will probably have to go up to make up for those differences. But as far as efficiency, your point is well made. You got to look at private hands in running these institutions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Rotus, we'll see you again tomorrow morning.
All right. Well, let's not cross to London where Michael Wilson is standing by. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Chinese stock. Good morning, everybody. Chinese stocks relatively steady. That's after what the US Federal Reserve said yesterday. I'll come on to that slightly later on. Hong Kong up 1%. The Nikkei's flat. Singapore shares hurt by banking stocks there. The central bank asked lenders to cap dividends this year. Now, this has happened here as well. And the problem with that is that most people invest in bank stocks because they are predicted to give a steady payout to shareholders, and that's actually been crimped by this by this instruction from the central monetary authorities there. As I say, the same thing's happened here. You can understand it in a way because we've seen banks like Barclays, Lloyds and so on and NatWest hit by having to provide for bad debt. So they have to increase their capital cushion a bit, and I think there's a bit of nervousness that the same kind of wreckage that happened in the 2008 financial crisis doesn't happen again as a result of this. So we had some mixed earnings. You better start getting into those luxury shops, you chaps, because LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Gucci and Hermes, also Montclair make those nice puppets they've seen. Shops being actually closed. So what did the Fed say yesterday that was new? Very little, just a further determination to help out, rates unchanged, obviously, lubricating the world in a few more dollars, if I can put it like that. I don't want to get too technical about it, but that's the bottom line. And the Fed's decision really is saying, in a lot of ways, and we know that what's happening on Capitol Hill is actually quite important now, this sort of endless discussion about this new stimulus package, and we're getting to the end of the month, obviously, so something needs to be decided very, very soon. But Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed, is effectively saying by this, look, we'll do what we can, but it's down to politicians now to start, getting over the partisan stuff and deciding exactly what to do. So US stocks, they finished their session slightly higher, helped by the Fed's dovish stance. There's good old Jay. Right. So the other thing yesterday, the big one, was the head of some of the world's biggest tech companies were in front of Congress yesterday. And the doctor asked me about this business of splitting things up. Well, it could happen. Amazon boss Jeff Bezos said that the world needs large firms. The appearance comes as lawmakers in the United States are considering tougher regulation, and competition probes are actually underway. We've been quite firm with them in Europe, actually, as you know, saying, you may be based in the United States, you may be US companies, but you make a lot of money here, therefore you will pay our taxes. And that's something which actually goes on. Competition issues too ultimately, now here's the thing, lawmakers could well break these companies up, but there has been pressure, for example, WhatsApp and Instagram to be turned back into separate companies, but I think it's pretty unlikely. US competition law is very, very strict, and what tends to happen is there have to be big bad behaviour, and then the companies tend to say, oh yeah, really sorry about that, and continue along their merry way. So they fix the bad behaviour and they move on. That's the history of it. Don't know. Right, today, US jobs, the weekly figures. Payroll data did improve slightly in March and April, but the gains seen in May and June may not be shown today. These are the weekly figures, of course, not the monthly payroll figures, which are later on. We saw the first, if you were watching me then on the Global Business Report with Rotus last week, we saw the first increase in weekly jobless claims since March. Not by a lot, but it is an increase, and continuing claims may well hit a sort of figure of 16.2, maybe 17 million. We'll see. It's a big day for Germany as well, Q2 GDP figure. And, of course, the same coming from the United States. We don't actually... we talk about these numbers all the time. I really think it's worth considering, not so much the statistics and the spreadsheets and the rest of it and the balances of what's going on, but the human picture and what kind of jobs people will actually be going back to. And again, we're going to see some deterioration, obviously, out of Europe today. And finally, gold continuing to test that sort of $2,000 an ounce figure. I think they probably will keep trying to test it, but it tends to fall back quickly. And oil is relatively unchanged. That's your global view this morning.
Well, Michael Wilson, I'd like to take you back to the appearance of the tech Goliaths before Congress yesterday. Now, is this really about antitrust and competition and unfair trade practices, or this is about President Trump and election, considering the fact that there was no meeting of minds between the Democrats and the Republicans, which makes it look like as if there may be no legislative fix. And President Trump has been boasting that if Congress does not do something about these big tech companies, then he will use an executive order. So is this all about election year grandstanding, or there are real issues about abuse of the law?
I think it's about both. I think there's a lot of electioneering, grandstanding going on, because that's the kind of world that we live in, and that's the timetable in the United States. But I think there are certainly worries about big companies. Yesterday we were talking, weren't we, about a similar thing with Standard Oil, which was broken up after the... after the Second World War. And you know, there were concerns there about things being too big, because once companies get absolutely massive, the competition ceases. They take out the competition. They buy it, like Facebook and Google and Amazon have done themselves. I like the fact that they have been in the past sort of disruptors, but what some of them, including Facebook and Google, have turned into, they are social media sites. Data is the most important currency in the world right now, and it tends to influence people. And the fact that there are fewer big media organizations around dealing in this kind of comment and news that we do, I think is a problem. Too much fake news, not enough experience in the people actually reading that fake news, and therefore they are able to influence. They're able to influence elections, and they're also allowed, or they can be used as a conduit for people around the world who would like to influence elections as well. I name no names, but you know exactly what I'm talking about, and that is a big problem for these companies. I think they have grown so big that they don't really even know how to control themselves. I think that's part of the problem. But you're right to draw attention to the electioneering as well, of course.
All right, okay.
Sorry. But it was intriguing to see that some of them yesterday were downplaying their size and their strength. But I'd like to know your thoughts, Michael, on this. At the end of it all, are we likely to see new regulations for these big techs, or do you see an overall?
I don't think we're going to see that very, very soon. As I said, it's very difficult to push this kind of stuff through the US legal system. Competition law is extremely complicated. And what tends to happen is there is a bit of censuring, and then the companies say sorry and then continue. I mean, if you're going to really do it, then you have to start to break them up into constituent parts, but they will grow. The bottom line argument about all this is, of course, that people actually use these companies, and they are huge domestic gains for the United States. So there will be a lot of politicians either side of the divide, not very certain about which way this ought to go. And as I said yesterday, I don't actually think that many of these politicians actually understand the bottom line working of these companies either.
I mean, Michael, that was what I saw yesterday. When I watched the session, when you saw the men questioning the tech giants, they don't even know about tech. It was so obvious. They don't know the business. Secondly, Michael, I don't think this will work. And I'll take you back historically. In the 1890s, there was something like this that happened, that the business community came together, and everybody came together, and they started something called the Shaman's Act. Where is the Shaman's Act many years down the line? You still need to nip a little bit of people out there, but the core businesses cannot get down because they are quite big. They morphed into this giant, into this Godzilla that they are today. And that's why, to a large extent, you can't even regulate a business you don't know. So I'm not sure the House means what they're doing. They're just wasting their time.
I agree. I think it's right that the public see that these tech giants being defended, though, by their people. I'll tell you what's missing in all this, and as you were talking, it just suddenly occurred to me. Do you remember somebody called Ralph Nader in the United States?
Yeah, Ralph Nader that ran for president in year 2000. Consumer rights activist.
Well, consumer activist as well. That's where he started, and he was very much, on the side of the consumer. What the consumer now is, I think, is slightly fragmented, and I think we say, look, we use Google. Google has become a verb, for heaven's sake, hasn't it? It's like vacuum. It's become a verb, right? We can also have it perhaps with a small g, a lowercase g sometimes as well. That's the problem. I don't think the consumer is necessarily too worried about the huge of these companies. If you're getting stuff delivered and it's arriving on time, and you can search things and you can keep in touch with your pals and watch sport or whatever it may be on the telly, I think you're happy.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson.
And now let's turn to the COVID-19 pandemic updates with Aaron Akarijala. Good morning, Aaron.
Yeah, good morning to you, Adesuwa. Good morning to you, Dr.
Good morning,
Rufai.
Aaron.
Good morning. Now, let's get straight into it today. And I must actually say, it's been 6 months since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a public health emergency of international concern. 6 months down the line, and we are at 17,033,048. That's the total number of confirmed cases of COVID-19, with a global death of 667,084 at the moment. And now let's get straight into it. Let's try and see what we can capture in the last 6 months. And that is actually how it looks like. The COVID-19, understanding very well that this COVID-19, it has to be distinguished because coronavirus was first discovered back in the 1930s. So coronavirus disease 19, all right, from the strain of the severe SARS-CoV-2, as they like to call it in the science parlance. And that's how it actually looks in the body, literally. Moving on to the next one now. Let's try to break it down. Now, we've talked about common symptoms of COVID-19. Over the last 6 months, it has been the list has been growing on and on for common patients. Of course, between 83% to 99% would actually develop fever, loss of appetite, fatigue. You can actually see the ratios to determine, but most of the most prevalent ones are the fever, loss of appetite, shortness of breath. We've seen some cough. We've seen very few people have complained of body aches, and also some other coughing up, sputum, and the rest of them. In the severe cases, of course, difficulty in walking, confusion. We've seen coughing up blood, persistent chest pain. All these are symptoms that we've been able to collate over time, and the list is still growing because, as we know, it's still a novel virus still being unraveled. And till we can get a hang on it, these things will keep evolving with time. Moving on quickly, and now severally they've spoken about prevention. They talk about wearing of any kind of face covering, ensuring that you sanitize your hands, wash your hands, very, very important. And they've spoken to people as much as possible, try and keep yourself away from pets if your pets are not confined to closed spaces, because they can turn to spreaders for people who don't know. Then also, eating of raw foods, you must actually ensure that foods are thoroughly clean, cooked properly, and before consumption, and always coughing into your hands. People have stopped that over time. Coughing into your hands is still very, very important, and also avoiding contact with sick people, having regular rest, and more importantly, social distancing. If you can, stay at home. Moving on, over the last 6 months, we've seen it actually evolve. Of course, Wuhan started as the place where the epicenter for COVID-19 was. It went to Iran, northern Italy, Spain, New York, and right now it has actually cascaded the entire world. And it's very worrying for the WHO, because it is accelerated at a pace they themselves did not envisage. Although people would claim that they've always been playing second fiddle in terms of catching up with how fast this virus has been mutating or evolving. Now, moving on to the next one quickly to help us cover some of the grounds in terms of COVID-19. All right, okay, looking at it, we've spoken about COVID-19, not just touching the health of humans around the world, it is also ravaged economies. All right, between then and now, we're still in a global recession, as the IMF and some experts will put it, between the 20th of February 2020 till date. That's 5 months, 1 week, and 2 days. That's how much it has ravaged the economy, and we're not sure when these things will abate. Let's see what happens. We are hoping for better times. For hunger, the World Food Hunger Program has said that 265 million people have been thrown into hunger because of COVID-19. And also not just hunger, we've seen the largest, moving on to the next one, schools like never before. In about 166 or 161 countries, 98.6% of the world's student population have been told to stay at home. Now, there are still debates whether to open or not. We know in Nigeria that talks from the 4th of August for schools to begin reopening in phases. But let's see what becomes of it. But we've never seen something actually bring life to a screeching halt like this. This is the 6th largest. This is the 6th major epidemic or pandemic we've seen in the history of the world, and this is looking like the worst, says the WHO. We'll see how things are playing out in Europe. Quickly, you can actually see at a certain time, Spain were at the epicenter, then we saw France actually overtaking the UK, Germany, Italy. But at the moment, while the rest of Europe are flattening the curve, we're seeing Spain actually, you can see the line, they're just moving up and up, which is quite worrisome, and that's why the UK government decided to say anyone returning from Spain, from any part of Spain, must quarantine for 14 days, based on data, not just based on probably wishful thinking or so. Moving on to others, you can actually also understand that countries that have actually seen a second rise, because we're talking about the first wave right now, we have not even got into the second wave. There's a second rise in the first wave, and we're seeing places like Israel, Iran, Australia, Japan actually having a second rise in the first wave, which is quite worrisome. Understand that some of those places at some point in time were celebrating that they had been able to put it under lock and key, talking about the virus, but unfortunately, we're saying that as soon as lockdowns are being eased, this virus begins to spring up again. Moving on to the next one now, and you can actually see the ratio of deaths. Asia certainly has seen quite a lot of deaths. Europe, North America, the Latin America, and the Caribbean. It's the Middle East and Africa that has the lowest deaths, all right, per day, and also in the last coming days from COVID-19. So you look at these things, and it's quite worrisome for areas like the Latin America and the Caribbean region, which is still rising heavily, and also North America, of course, the US accounting for most of that. Then Europe, they're beginning to flatten the curve in terms of deaths, and also Asia is beginning to rise. India, to be very specific, is turning to a very hot spot for the COVID-19 virus. And before we actually go, let's still actually touch on something. Now, it took about 38 days for cases worldwide to go from 5 million to 10 million. It took just 24 days for it to move from 10 million to 15 million. As we speak today, it is over 17 million. And it's quite worrisome. We're not sure it might abate very soon, and that is why the race for a vaccine is more important than ever before.
Indeed,
Well,
Aaron. Sorry, Doctor. Beyond these things you have said, because by this time, 6 months ago, there were only 100 cases outside of China. But just to add to all the things you've said, in the last 6 months, we have seen that women are better leaders in handling the crisis. And I can mention a few countries, Germany, New Zealand, you know, and many more.
Although people have questioned, and there's some people have questioned.
No, they can't question because the numbers speak for themselves.
What Jacinda Ardern actually did and soft pedal has almost thrown New Zealand almost reeling back to where they all started from. And they question the fact that
but you cannot compare those numbers. They've gone days and weeks without local transmission.
True.
So apart from exposing that women are better leaders in crisis, it has also exposed vulnerabilities in healthcare systems.
Most definitely.
Even in the countries where we thought they had the best, we see them crumbling. It has also shown us that we need to have serious conversations about our environment, and the climate change talks need to be taken more seriously.
Well, I mean, we don't need to reduce it to gender, because the truth of the matter is that
it's not about gender.
Women have also been most affected.
Yes, they are.
We've seen that women are, you know, a bit more vulnerable, and particularly blacks, Asians, and minority ethnic groups. But there was something you brought up that I think we can focus on, which is the threat of hunger. Oxfam, in a recent report, pointed out that about 120,000 persons are likely to die per day as a result of coronavirus. And that hunger is likely to kill more people than even COVID-19 if governments do not wake up. So there are two major challenges that we face. One, the race to get a vaccine. I think that will help. So the scientists have a big job before them. The second, of course, is to provide a threat of drought, famine, or biblical proportions. And the connection here is that COVID-19 has affected agricultural output, supply systems, making many poor countries and the underprivileged quite vulnerable. Well, thank you, Aaron.
It was a pleasure.